we're getting started. I know folks are going to be rolling in here for a minute or two, so we will be waiting a sec to fully get started, because I know we've got people joining from all over. I am going to be your MC for this event. I'm Conor Bronsdon. I'm the co-host of the DevOps podcast. I'm joining y'all from Olympia, Washington. And I would love to see if folks don't mind just putting in chat, where are you joining us from? We'd love to hear. I'm always really curious. And then Steve and Yishai, I'm going to ask you the same question here in a sec when we get started. So I see Chicago, I see Paris, I see
London.
Johannesburg. Wow, yeah, all over the place. So that is awesome. And thank you all for hopping in here. I know we're really excited to kick off this workshop about the 2023 Accelerate State of DevOps report, also known as the DORA report. You may know it that way. You can see Steve's fantastic shirt on that. It looks like we've got over 100 people in here already from Senegal, Turin, all over the place. So I'm going to just do some intros to get us rolling. Brazil, amazing. Thank you all so much for making time. Really excited to have you here. I'm delighted to be joined by our esteemed guest, Google's Steve McGhee. Steve was an SRE at Google for over a decade in Android, YouTube, cloud, and now is a reliability advocate on the DORA team. So he helps companies to build robust, reliable systems with resilient, sustainable teams in the cloud. Steve, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. That's exactly correct. Everything you said is accurate. I'm calling in from San Luis Obispo, California, which makes me an SRE who is living in SLO, which is hilarious.
That's a bit of a mouthful. I feel like I would mess that up all the time.
I practice a lot.
Okay, smart. Also joining me is LinearB CTO and my friend Yishai Beeri. Yishai has leveraged decades of programming and research experience to help lead companies like CloudLock to acquisition, and now heads LinearB's benchmarks research, building upon the research foundations laid by Google's DORA team. And we're really excited to talk a bit about how those research foundations this year have supported the work DORA is doing and kind of confirmed some of those findings. Yishai, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Connor. Great being here, and yeah, great to connect with you, Steve, and hash through some of the very interesting findings in the DORA reports and the benchmarks we've been doing. This is exciting.
Absolutely. And Quinette, I see you have a question here about captions enabling for the session. I think we're having an issue with the live captioning, but we will share out a recorded session afterwards that includes captions. So we'll get that figured out for you. And I'll take a peek at the settings here in a second too, to try to add captions, make sure we've got that moving, because it looks like we're having an issue. Everyone, thank you so much for joining us. We're going to start off by having Steve outline this year's 2023 DORA report and then dive into the details of what insights the team at Google gleaned, as well as how it aligns to LinearB's own findings and our quantitative data. And then we'll pause partway through, about 20, 25 minutes in, maybe 30, depending on how excited we get. And we'll take some Q&A. So if you have Q&A questions, drop them in the Q&A session here. There's the live chat where people will be engaging a bit, but leave them in the Q&A and we'll try to answer them all later. I'll also try to bring up questions for the audience that come out throughout. So yeah, just make sure you're using that Q&A function. And afterwards, we'll dive into some of the research from LinearB's engineering benchmarks and how that quantitative work is supporting DORA's qualitative research. Plus, share how you can get your team's DORA metrics for free. We've got a couple of fantastic folks in chat like Adam. He's going to help you out, share some links. And we'll also share a copy of the DORA report and our LinearB benchmarks via email after the event, along with the recording at the event. Thanks everyone for joining us from India, from across the world. Steve, LinearB was really excited to partner with your team at Google on this year's report. We're huge fans of the DORA research, and we believe there's a major opportunity between the qualitative research you're doing and our quantitative benchmarks research to provide engineering teams the insights and context they need to continuously improve and to align to their unique needs. Could you start by giving us a brief overview of what the 2023 DORA Accelerate State of DevOps report encompasses?
Sure. I'm going to present a couple slides if that's okay, because it just gives us something to look at too. Did that come up okay? I think it should be a picture of a person touching a tablet.
Looks great for me. Yeah.
All right, cool. So yeah, the DORA report, we do this every year. This is actually the 10th year, which is pretty exciting. And this is a survey that we do every year of practitioners. And I think we hit 6,000 people this year, which is a pretty good N for the statisticians out there. And the whole idea is to figure out like what it is that people do in the sort of the DevOps angle of the world. And then what are the outcomes of that? Like how is it working? Is it working well? And so by connecting these two things, like what are you actually doing? And then how's it going? And doing a bunch of stats, basically, we can say, we can produce this report that is representative of how DevOps works for different groups of people. And because of that, you as a DevOpsin in the world, or a person who wants to have their team do DevOps, or just wants to improve their how things work, you can take these results and you can have a pretty good understanding that this is going to work for me too. So often what we hear when we talk to folks is like, well, it may have worked for them, but it doesn't work for me. Like, this is why we have statistics, right? We can say like, well, why are you so much different from all these other teams that come from these, variety of different, industries and age of team and, huge corporations and small teams? Like, it's a pretty wide, diverse field, and you probably fit into these buckets. Like, this is just how stats works. So that's the super high level view of it. Let's talk a little bit about what happened this year. You can check it all out on DORA.dev. If you go to /report, you'll get to the thing. You can download the full report. There are some takeaways. We can talk about reliability just because I like reliability. But I've slimmed this down a lot. So this is not the full big how to talk through the whole report thing. If you want to go to DORA.dev/research/2003, there's a good infographic there that you can kind of glance at and get the basics from, maybe before you step into the full report. Or if you want to just send some ideas to someone without them having to read the whole report, this infographic is a good way to get at it. That said, the points I want to point out are right here. And it's all in one slide. It's really easy. So the first one is culture. There's a lot of ways that you can measure culture, and there's a lot of ways to determine how your culture is affecting the outcomes of your software delivery performance. But the important thing that we've found this year is that even if you have amazing tech and other abilities, without the right culture, it just doesn't help. Like, the culture is more important than we realized. And maybe this is obvious if you've kind of been doing this for a while, but we've seen plenty of teams that kind of think we'll get to the culture thing later. We need to focus on shipping product right now, and it turns out that's not going to work. So the next one is user centricity. This is an interesting one because it permeated a lot of different questions that we asked, which was basically, if you're able to focus on the user, which is really a subset of your culture, do you make decisions with the end user in mind? Is that who you're thinking of, instead of what it is that we want to accomplish as our team, or short-term needs? Do we keep the end user in mind and try to focus on keeping it fast, keeping it reliable, keeping solving real problems for our customer? As long as you're doing that seems to permeate a lot of technical issues, right? So same idea of, if you have all of the tools in the world, but you're not following this user centricity way of thinking, it's not going to be as effective. And so the way that we figured this out was basically, we asked some questions around these, and we found that teams that answered basically yes to this, they're yes, we think about user-centric ways of doing things, they just tended to succeed more, which is what we call in statistics world, it's not exactly causation or correlation. It's what we call predictive behavior, right? So we can say if you do this, we can predict that you will have this outcome. And this is kind of the core conceit of the whole DORA thing, is that a lot of these measurements can predict outcomes, which is pretty great. The next one, which was not exactly new, but we just dug into it further this year than we had in the past, which was, we all know that documentation is important, but why, how important? Is it really important, or do we just feel like it's important? Turns out it's important. And it's not just having some documentation. That we go into detail in the report of what we mean by quality documentation and what you get out of it. And then there's a few theories as to why. Because remember, we're not really answering exactly why. The survey can't tell us why certain things predict other things, but we do have theories as to why. And that tends to come from just our, kind of history, our being practitioners ourselves, talking with cloud customers here at Google. But we do know that it works. And that's kind of the most important part. The next one is seems maybe coming from the Google guy, flexible infrastructure is important. So having the ability to be able to bring up infrastructure and bring it back down and move quickly. This is just agility at your infrastructure level. So the ability to do this not only seems like a good idea, but again, it predicts these better outcomes. And we saw this in the data this year. And this was because we specifically asked these questions this year, and we found that this outcome was true. The last one, it kind of ties back to the culture idea. We did find that underrepresented groups are, not necessarily having the best time all the time, and they need to be considered when it comes to making sure that your team is successful. So specifically, we found that folks who are underrepresented, so this can be women or people who self-identify as like a racial minority or another gender minority, a few different varieties, they tend to have higher levels of burnout. They tend to have more toil, and their work is less recognized. So what do we do about this? This is basically a job for leadership, right? So leads within a team, if they know this fact, they can do things to prevent this. So they can help solve this problem. And so again, this was a thing that we kind of had in our minds. We all kind of thought like, oh, this is, we think this is maybe happening. We did the measurement. It is definitely happening. And so if you want your teams to be more successful, you need to, eliminate this problem essentially, right? We want to make sure that we can get these underrepresented groups to be much more fulfilled. They're going to be less likely to leave your team, right? Things like this. So this is an important finding as well. There's now a bonus one. I just want to throw one in there. There's a bunch of findings in the report, but I want to just highlight one more. And this is around code review specifically. So we did find that if you have faster code reviews, and by faster I mean there's like a range of results that people could fill in as the answer to the survey. People who are on the faster end of that tended to again it was predictive that they would have 50% higher software delivery performance, and this higher performance begets these amazing outcomes, which is like the teams achieve what they want to achieve, the organizations achieve what they want to achieve, which tends to be like, think of the team achievement as like we actually are able to close all our bugs and get good OKRs and like have a pizza party at the end of the quarter. The organizational objectives, the things that the organization achieves, is basically like we shipped a product, like we made money, right? Like we maybe our revenue increased by some amount. Like these are organizational level improvements. Another thing that we see that coincides with software delivery performance is essentially just happiness, right? So this is the well-being of your employees. So people tend to be happier when the software delivery improvement happens. So this is the pattern that you'll see through the DORA report, is if you can change what we call a capability, like if you can do something better within your organization, in this case, code reviews, right? Just do code reviews in a better way. I'll get to what I mean by better in a second. If you can do these better, especially if one of them is holding you back, then you'll get better outcomes, right? And that means basically people get things done, you make more money, and everyone's happier, which is great. So I highly recommend those things. There's actually a DORA discussion in like an hour and a half. So the DORA.community group is having a discussion about code reviews today, very soon. There's going to be another one tomorrow. You can see the time zones and the times down at the bottom there. If you just go to DORA.community, you can find it there. Anyone can join. We're going to talk about code reviews today, so please join. Here's some questions about code review that you might consider, right? I'm not going to read them all. You can look at them yourself, but like, if you have a way to do these things and to think about these things in this way, this will help you improve your code review within your organization. This makes a big difference. And I think that you guys are going to talk about this a little bit more in a second.
Yeah, so
I'm gonna cut it there because there's way more in the report, but let's just stick with the high level stuff.
This is perfect, Steve. I'm gonna pass to Yishai in a second. I'll just highlight for folks. We're gonna hit some Q&A here in about 10:30, so make sure you get your Q&A questions into the chat. I know Yishai has a couple he's gonna bring up here in a sec. And then around 10:40ish, we're gonna dive more into this code review piece. So make sure you're asking your questions in the Q&A chat. Yishai, I'll pass it back to you.
Yeah, this is great, Stephen. Really reassuring, the fact that you're not finding contradictions. Like you improve in one place and that will dial you back in another place. It's a win-win-win, right? If you improve your code reviews or any of the other dials that are holding you back, you will get the team results, you'll get the org results, and happier developers.
Yep.
So I'm wondering, is any way to understand why teams are still held back given that there's like, oh, it's a no-brainer, right?
It seems so easy. Like, what's so hard about this? Honestly, the problem that we find the most is that there's a lot of things you could possibly be working on, and so teams will like focus on all of them, right? And then they'll make very little progress on any of them, or they'll pick something that they're actually already pretty good at, and they'll be like, let's get really good at this. And we're like, no. Like this is about like think of like the narrow waist problem, right? Like what is the thing that's holding you back? Like that's the thing you want to work on. And honestly, it's very, I mean, it kind of seems obvious when I put it this way, but like the thing that you've been avoiding working on is probably the thing that's holding you back, and you're probably avoiding working on it, right? So like, I'm sorry, but you're going to have to improve your code review process or whatever it is that is kind of holding you back. And this is just kind of like a call to action to be like, look, other teams have done it. It does work. It's worth doing. It's not just like pure pain, but like there will be benefits to it. It's kind of like diet and exercise. Like, like often, like I have to do these things. I'm really bad at diet and I keep needing to be good at diet and I keep being bad at it. So why? And then you just have to bite the bullet and do it. So that's it.
So when thinking about improvement, and in general, I think this I've seen this everywhere. There's a school of thought saying, focus on your strength, right? Improve where you're already great at. You're not going to change yourself on the places you're weakest. So double down on you're doing well and use that to grow. The other school is, let's find the things that are holding me back or the places where I'm weakest and let's improve those. If I'm hearing you correctly, your data is showing that if you're just honing your greatest strengths, there's diminishing returns here as a team, and you want to focus on the places where you're weak.
Exactly. So as an example, I come from the reliability space, right? I'm an SRE. And so we've seen plenty of customers who, especially at early stage, and kind of rightfully so, like if you're just developing a product that isn't even launched yet or something like that, sure, don't focus on reliability. You're just trying to get the MVP, trying to get the market fit. However, we find that lots of customers later down, once they're actually starting to scale up, they'll say, well, we don't want to focus on reliability because we're trying to add features. Right. And that still kind of makes sense. But we've found in this research, if you ignore reliability entirely, if you answer the questions in a low way on the reliability questions, and you answer high on the velocity questions, you never enter the high performing category. Like those associations just 0% happen. Like it's only when you do both of these things together that you make it up and sort of like to the top right. And so from that, we can say like, it's great to have some of the skills, like this, just the basic software delivery stuff. But if you don't also have reliability to go with it, you're never going to make it into that top right corner. And if you think about that, like it's because you're getting code into production and it's not like sticking, right? It's not staying in production. You
doesn't work. It's there, but it doesn't work.
Like, it kind of makes sense. But like, I mean, if you kind of say to yourself as a company, like, we're not good at reliability, let's focus on our velocity instead. You need to have both. You can't just focus on the one. And this repeats itself for all the different capabilities.
Yeah, and this is something. Sorry, go ahead, Yishai.
Yeah, when you talk about velocity and reliability, there's a common thought that for to be reliable, I need to go slower. I need to be a bit slower because velocity is risky. But I think we found, and I'm sure you have, that sometimes that's not the case. Sometimes velocity is a vehicle for reliability.
Yeah. It turns out stuff breaks because the code, it needs to be fixed, right? And the way that you fix the code is by pushing code into production, right? So if you can't push code into production effectively, how do you fix the thing that's broken in production, right? So like it's this weird like Ouroboros kind of like snake eating its own tail thing, but like it's real. Like we also found in the report, you'll see it in the reliability section that not only does it take more reliability to get you up into that top corner, you can't get into that. You can't have high reliability without having high software development and deployment patterns and capabilities. So you kind of need to like ratchet them up.
Capped, right?
Sorry, say that again.
Bugs will happen, and if you're capped at the speed in which you can deploy a fix, reliability has it's like a ceiling.
That's right. And so there's two sources of reliability problems. And one is bugs. Oh man, what is this? What is going on here?
This is the new Mac.
Yeah, I got to turn that off, man. So there's two sources of these problems. One is like self-imposed, right? A bug. And the other one is environmental, right? There was a fire in the data center or something like that, or like some dependency like had a thing. Both of those things need to have you have the ability to respond. And both of those responses are going to be pushing code to production, whether it's configuration, if you're editing a YAML, you're still pushing code, right? It's the same thing.
Right. And I think in a different scale, being able to respond quickly to customer feedback, user feedback. This thing it's not a bug, but it's not working well. The experience is not good. Mm-hmm. Oh, but it's going to take me 3 months to deliver a fix because of, then again, it's not reliability, but velocity is not just about pushing new features. It's about having a tight cycle to respond to inputs.
Totally.
You basically, the DORA research is focused on surveys, right? You're asking questions, you're compiling the results, you're doing a lot of stats, big N. Did you look at combining that with any kind of measurement data, like a combination of the quantitative and qualitative responses?
Honestly, no. I would really love to do that. Currently, all of the DORA report comes from the survey data. So this is a survey-based report. Given that, being able to triangulate results with more than one data source, hugely improves the reliability essentially of the outcomes, the ability for us to believe the outcomes. So being able to do that is a thing that we want to do in the future. So that said, we do have the idea of these DORA metrics, right? And being able to show that these measured results result in the same thing. These we get through the survey data today currently. So it is metrics that can be recorded by teams in a direct way, as you guys I'm sure are aware. But currently the way we do the report is we ask people the results of those measurements, and sometimes it just comes off the top of their head. Sometimes it comes from a tool. Sometimes it comes from a report. So it can be from anywhere.
Are you capturing that? Are you aware of whether this came from a tool or not?
No,
or
it's purely just survey response only.
Got it. Interesting. Another thing that I was wondering about, do you have repeat responders? And are you looking at year over year changes in specific,
a longitudinal survey of cohorts that come back every year, things like this?
Yeah. Are they improving? Are they changing? Are they even aware of that?
We do that per industry, but not per organization, or certainly not per individual. So we don't have a longitudinal intent, and I don't think we even have. I'd have to talk to our researcher about if we even have the ability to potentially do that. But we do it per industry, so we can see how healthcare has done over the last decade, and how IT has done over the last decade, things like that.
Cool. So and finally, just one more question, and then I'm wondering, as this is based on surveys, I'm wondering if you're seeing any kind of consistent bias. Are people overestimating or underestimating how they're doing, how their teams are doing? Do you have different responders from the same org? Are you seeing any kind of patterns there?
So I don't think we expose that in this report, but we do the same type of analysis on a company by company. Basically when we're not doing the DORA report, the other 3/4 of the year, we're going and talking to Google Cloud customers, and we're helping them through their own basically mini DORA analysis. And so they answer a bunch of questions, and we do a bunch of statistical stuff on site or with them directly. And there we definitely see that, right? So we tend to see that we'll call them the boots on the ground engineers tend to have a much lower sense of how things are going. And the further you go up in the chain, the rosier things get, which is kind of as you might expect. People tend to overestimate or over-report up the chain how well things are doing. That is highly represented in the data. We definitely see that. We do also
people feeling the pain are the ones that are giving themselves and their teams lower scores.
Yeah. So are they artificially too low? I don't know, but certainly there's a difference between if you're an IC, or if you're a manager, or if you're a 2 or 3 or 4 person manager, levels. I mean, and this is very much present in the data.
Interesting.
This is really interesting stuff, and it brings to mind the opportunity for improvement. And one of the ways that we've talked about this is, how do we apply these organizational insights to actually improve your team? Something we talk a lot about at LinearB. So I'd love to kind of ask two questions of both of you. One, how do you both think teams should be applying these insights to try to improve? Is it, that focus on code reviews that we're going to dig into here in about 15, 20 minutes? Is it something else? Is it, dependent on the team? And two, how do we avoid weaponizing metrics and these, improvement opportunities? Because I know a lot of devs who may be listening may be concerned that, establishing a metrics program or, starting to take these benchmarks is going to harm their day-to-day dev experience.
Yeah, this is a big concern. Again, like the tough answer here is like this requires thought. Like this requires some work and some thought. It's not just like a straight like install the tool, like get result at the end. So the suggestions that we make, like the first is an anti-suggestion. Please don't make a leaderboard for your different groups within your organization, and then incentivize people to be the top of that leaderboard. Because people are at different points in their software development cycle for many myriad reasons. So for example, if you have one team who's like building like super cool new node serverless whatever, and another team that runs the mainframe, guess who's winning, right? Like, and it's not their fault, right? It's not because they're like making bad choices and are bad employees. Like they have this giant hunk of metal in the basement that they're dealing with. So what you do instead is you give people their own stats over time. And right, we're just looking for improvement over time, right? If you can see that your numbers are going up, you're winning. That's all you need to know.
Yeah, and I'll add to that. I think in almost all of the dimensions you're looking at, it's a team sport. So by looking at the team and how the team is doing, I'm actually thinking of most of these metrics or axis of the, be it the survey or the data. Here's what's holding you back, team. This is a tool for you to improve. It's not a measurement of your performance, right? You're held back by slow reviews or by quality issues and so on. This is where you should focus. We just, discussed this. So positioning this as a tool for the team rather than a measure, like a measurement tool for comparing teams or even individuals. That's the key way to avoid weaponizing, in my opinion.
Yep. So you want to use so there's like the 4 metrics, right? And these are the ones that people tend to kind of hyperfixate on. Don't hyperfixate, right? Like you want to use these as an indicator of the experiment that you're running this quarter in terms of improving how we do change approval or something, right? Those 4 metrics are going to tell you if it's working or not. And they're going to tell you if that was the right experiment to run. Right. And so if those 4 numbers like stay still, then that wasn't the thing. Okay, we got it wrong. No problem. Let's try something else next quarter or next week or month or whatever. Right. That's all that those metrics do. They just give you the number of like, is the thing helping? And if it's not helping, that doesn't mean you're a bad person. It just means you haven't found the thing yet. Right. You want to find that narrow waist. What's the thing that's holding us back? And those things tend to be these capabilities that we show on the DORA site.
Yeah, so it's like I'm seeing 2 motions about how companies and development orgs go about improving using metrics, and obviously DORA metrics are very much at the center. They're very popular. People usually start there. So one motion is the retrospect motion, right? We have a sprint. We try to change something. We decide on moving some knob. And then we can use those metrics to say, oh, did this help over a few sprints, a quarter, or whatever? If it's moving my metrics in the right place, that's probably a good thing to continue focusing on. And I found it, like you mentioned. If it's not, let's look for something else. The other motion, I think they are complementary, is can I find a micro flow or change that helps this developer right now with this pull request? Doesn't have to be a team decision, but can I find something that helps me and saves me a minute, makes me happier, and also moves the needle on those metrics? And then together, you have this longer cycle of, let's find out what's wrong, fix it, use the metrics to validate. And then can I find those microflows that help me, either automate away or just help me do the right thing at the right time with my current task. And then I'm happy. Metrics are happy. Both motions are, I'm seeing them use it with great success to move the metrics and improve the final outcomes.
Yeah, this is tactics and strategy, right? Like you want to be able to build the ability to try different tactics every day, and you want to make sure that you're choosing appropriate strategies and seeing if they work in the long term. You have to use both. You can't just do one or the other.
Right. How do I go about culture? You mentioned that as one of the key.
I'm actually going to adjust your question here slightly because we have a Q&A question from the audience that directly relates to that. So we're about halfway through, so I want to make sure we get to that. So I think this exactly aligns with what you were going to say, which is Dimitri asked in the Q&A section, what are the indicators of healthy or conversely non-healthy culture? Which I think gets exactly to what you're about to ask.
Yeah, that's tricky. So there's a few ways to measure culture. So I mentioned one thing before, which was focusing on the user, right? And then another one that you've seen probably is like the Western model of organizational culture. These are all models. They are not like exact ways of measuring something. The best thing you can do, honestly, is a little mini survey of your own team, right? And you just got to ask them, right? You just got to ask how do you guys feel the culture is here? And when it comes to like, what questions should we ask, Steve? This is where you can go to the report to see what it is that we've found have been the most effective indicators of culture. So a good one is, I'll just focus on the reliability one just because I speak that language. But one of them is like when we have an outage and we measure or we do like an analysis later, and we realize that some process kind of like wasn't great and had something to do with the outage. Do we stuff that in a box and put it away? Or do we, bring it forward and make sure that that's like the highlight of next sprint is improving that thing? Or do we, bureaucratically like run it through a process where it takes 6 months to come out the other side? Like there's lots of choices you can make here. When we know there's a thing that's a problem, what do we do with that thing? That can help you describe what type of culture your team has. It may not be your whole org, because remember, your org is made of many teams, and all these teams have slightly different cultures from each other. They can be highly different from each other, actually, right? And so what you can do is you can find, is your culture in a bad place? Is it kind of funny, right? From like this particular case, from the reliability aspect. What about all these other ones too? Like, do we actually, do we plan together as a group? Are decisions made by like the top down only? Like there's a lot of questions you could possibly ask, and I don't want to go through all of them because it's hard, but a lot of them will be, you can find them through the report. You can find them through social science, right? There's a whole like corner of science that has nothing to do with computers that is about this, which is like, organizational cultural improvements of teams. So I'm afraid it's a hard question. Like, there's many ways that people can work well or poorly together. So the trick is figure out where you are now and then change something and see what else you can change over time. One definition of culture is it's the things we tolerate. So if you're tolerating too much real bad stuff, right, and it's causing a problem, maybe don't tolerate it as much, right? Like, question it, try to fix it.
Yeah, and I think even the going for metrics and for like trying to understand where we were at, that's a good step forward in terms of culture. Just spending that time on this whole question.
Yeah, data driven, right? That's a form of culture. Do we make decisions based on data or on gut? Or the boss's opinion, right?
Related to that, Steve, we had a secondary question around culture. Nicole asks, is NPS a good culture metric? And says they're currently going after that. And so I'd be curious to get both of your perspectives on how to leverage NPS as far as looking at developer experience and culture.
So net promoter score, in case anyone's unfamiliar. I would say that it's good in the sense that it is customer centric, right? This is not what do we think we should build for our customers. This is how do our customers see our product? Like, are they actually choosing to use it, or would they rather use this other one, right? This is what the idea of, are they promoting us versus someone else, right? In a net way, kind of way. I think that in itself is good. However, right? Like as with all things, like don't hyperfixate on one number, right? This is not the be all end all of measurements. So, yeah, use it, sure. But like if something looks weird and it's confusing, maybe that's not the only, signal to look at.
Yeah. When I heard you ask that question, Connor, I was thinking, is this about using NPS internally? Is this about using NPS to gauge developer?
Which you could do.
happiness?
Yeah. And some people are doing in dev happiness.
You could do. I think with your own team, with your developers, and or you probably have the opportunity to use a wider lens. NPS is great because it's simple, right? It's one question, it's one number. You can put it on the wall and have it as a North Star. With your own people, you have I think an opportunity to go wider and ask more questions, not just one, like yes, no, are you happy, or similar adaptation of NPS.
Yeah. So another thing
if
to
you're doing
point
nothing, start with asking something.
Yeah. Don't forget there's something called the SPACE framework by Dr. Conor Bronsdon, which is basically like if you have one metric that you're using, that's probably not enough. So you want to add more metrics. So don't add one more of the same type of metric, right? So the SPACE framework gives you like different categories of types of metrics. And so if you can get like one for each letter, you're going to be in way better spot than like 5 of one letter. So this is a kind of a side pitch for the SPACE framework as well.
Awesome. I'm going to keep us going through this Q&A. I see a couple questions on code reviews. We're going to hold off on those for a few minutes here until we get to some deeper data around code reviews that Yishai is going to share that supports what Steve's highlighting here. But I do see a question here about, can you provide some insights on how high-performing teams manage technical debt according to the report? And I'm curious if there's anything that came up in the report around that.
I don't know. That's a good question.
Well, I will encourage that person to go check out the report. And if you want to follow up
let
with
us know.
Yeah. Awesome. And then we've got Todd here asking, do the 4 DORA metrics reveal any of the weaknesses related to these key insights?
Well, the insights are meant to be finding what works well. We didn't really build them in such a way to say, like, if you do this thing that works well, there's also these side effects. No. So I don't think there's a good answer for that one either. These are hard questions. These guys are tough.
Yeah. I think in general, my feeling in this, haven't been through the stats. When things go well, your metrics move to the right, or they're improving. But the converse, like having low scores on, I don't know, the 4 key DORA metrics doesn't necessarily point at the culprit.
Sure. Yep.
Right? You're going to have a bunch of reasons, and probably a combination that is even working together to hold you back. So it's easier to understand this change moved the needle for me, or sometimes this change set me back. Right? We all went remote with COVID. Is it helping or not? There's a war going on. Is it helping or not? All these things that's a change in the world, and you can use the 4 metrics to understand the impact this change is having, but not necessarily find the reason your metrics are currently low.
So as an example, I'm going out next week to a place in Kentucky to meet with a customer to talk about this with that customer for like a week. Like it's like they know what their DORA metrics are. They've been measuring for a while, but it's like, what do we actually do? And the answer is you have to sit down and you have to think about it. You have to actually like figure out, well, what is it that we're doing? What are the things we could be doing differently? Like what's actually holding us back? Like look at like, if it's the fail rate that you think is like the one that's like really low, like what are the capabilities that improve our fail rate? Like let's focus on those, and then we'll come up with a bunch of ideas and we'll test them for weeks and weeks and weeks until we see one that actually makes the number go up. And then we'll know like that was a good one. Like this is, I hate to say it, but this is just science, right? Like change one, do a measurement, change a variable, do another measurement, and like come up with, was the hypothesis, validated, or was it, falsified? So this is just what you have to do.
Awesome. Thanks for that context, gents. We're going to take a couple more questions here and then jump into the quantitative research around code reviews. And then we'll take a couple more questions here at the end, depending on time. So we do see a question here from Quinette around, as a software engineering manager, time tracking can remain a challenging process for software engineers, especially if they perceive it as a way of monitoring or controlling their work. Getting back to what we talked earlier about, the DORA metrics do not directly cover timekeeping for developers. Is my assumption correct that DORA metrics can help developers optimize their time and effort by identifying bottlenecks, inefficiencies, and risk in the software delivery process, by measuring, continuously iterating those metrics, and then any other best practices that you want to suggest?
Yeah. So this borders on like this is a slippery slope, right? So if we're going to get into like developer productivity, like how do I squeeze more developer out of my developer? The DORA metrics don't do that, right? And like, so like specifically, they're not individual metrics. They will not like help you get more squeeze out of each individual person. They will help you understand if your team's processes and tools are effective at all. And they may be being used more effectively by some than others. And that's something that you can, work with your team. But remember, like people are complex. So like if someone is like a low performer for some reason, it's probably not directly measurable through like a DORA metric, and it's probably not the tool's fault. Like there's a lot of things going on. And like I was a engineering manager for 10 years. Like it's hard. Like you have to actually have like conversations with your developers, like with your employees. You need to have human relationships with them. You have to understand what they're good at, what they like doing, make sure they're empowered, make sure that they have, autonomy, right, is important, right? Make sure they have mastery, right? We've heard these before. TLDR, like hot take, DORA will not manage for you. I'm afraid you still have to be a manager and you still have to have human relationships with people. Maybe I'm misunderstanding the question, but I've seen this go that direction like real quick and it gets real dark. So I'm this is like weaponizing the metrics against individuals. You don't want to do that. Like it's not effective and it's just not a good idea.
Yeah, I want to totally second that. But I think time tracking, I'm seeing this maybe happen in two kinds of ways. One is this developer working hard enough? Are they productive? All of these, stack ranking approaches, or like you said, squeezing more developer. This is going to fire back quickly and it's going to hurt. Talk about culture, but also it's a hard thing that the metrics and the measurements and the surveys are not going to help you achieve that. I think nothing beats being part of the team or the team lead that understands exactly what this person is doing, is not doing, is capable of otherwise. There's a very famous post about this, the best developer that doesn't write a line of code, right? But they're helping everyone else, and there's no tool that's going to capture that. The other aspect of time tracking is to better understand the kind of effort, again, not at an individual level, but the effort that goes into the building a feature or a capability or fixing a bug and so on. This is useful in higher levels of planning or just understanding cost versus value that you're getting as an organization from some dev work, right? Ideally, we all work on important things that the company needs. How much are we spending on those? How much effort goes into them? Is that what we planned? Are we aligning those with the right priorities? Because resources are always limited. That's a question that sometimes time tracking tries to solve. I have yet to see a stable and working time tracking solution, like where people actually record their time, that by having a tool measure it or by reporting it. The only place this is viable is when you bill your customers based on that time, right? As like lawyers. That's where time tracking works. I think that's developers hate it. And there's other ways to get at the same outputs, understanding or estimating in a good way the effort going into development of capabilities, all the way to financial reporting around this, right? CapEx, OpEx, all of these matter. You can do that without time tracking, without, this feature cost me 7 hours and 15 minutes. So I would encourage teams to try and walk away from trying to capture minutes in like direct time tracking, use other methods. They're out there. And I would finally say, yes, improving some of these things that eventually appear as improvements in DORA metrics are saving time for your developers. Developers hate context switches. If you can remove some of their context switches, you will save them time. You will squeeze more developer by giving them that wasted time back. But you're looking to resolve inefficiencies, not to make sure people are working harder.
Yeah, like to extend that metaphor, like if you were able to remove an hour of context switching, that's like hugely better than like making them work an extra hour a day, right? Like that would be a massive difference. Like it's still just an hour, and your time tracking wouldn't differentiate between these two changes, right? And so like I agree with you. The time tracking thing, it sounds like a good idea, and it kind of comes from like the past where like you had a bunch of fungible workers that were all like turning the same crank, and like as long as you got enough cranks out of the machine in enough time, then great. But this is not that type of work. Like it's dramatically different. Like this is knowledge work. It's just like you can sit and stare at a screen for 7 hours and type one semicolon in the right place, and you can make the company a ton of money. So like that's not turning a crank,
and that typically means you're a senior.
Exactly.
You know what you're doing.
That's right.
Guys, I'm going to move us along. I know we've got some great questions in chat. We're going to try to get to those at the end here. I'll also go in and answer some over text here shortly. But I want to pass it off to Yishai to dive more into this code reviews piece. I see several questions coming in around that. It's a lot of what we're talking about. And LinearB has done research over the last year around supporting the efforts that DORA has done and saying, okay, like what are we seeing in code reviews in particular? And so Yishai, I want to pass it off to you to talk about that. I know we surveyed over 2,000 dev teams to do that. Take it away.
Sure. So our framework here was to work on benchmarks, understand look at how the different metrics behave across a wide range of organizations and teams. So we're using the benchmark framework, trying to help our customers understand whether they are at the top of the range versus other places. But this uncovers, various insights about the behaviors of those metrics, and of the teams and developers that are working, and that their work gets measured in this way. Code reviews has long been a key focus for us. We've seen this in the field, and frankly, not surprised to see the DORA research corroborate that. Code reviews is, a key part of getting my code delivered. This is a place where a developer, which typically works alone, then moves and starts to be being dependent on their teammates in the process to get the code reviewed, eventually merged and deployed. And we've seen a pretty consistent in the data that longer reviews will create context switches, will create higher work in progress, a whole slew of problems that manifest in the 4 DORA metrics, but also in other places. And it's a place where there's almost always great opportunity to improve. It's probably going to be one of those things where you're held back. Few of our users and customers are, start off by being great at this. And a lot of impact by just changing and, moving the needle even a little has a lot of impact on their outputs. So our approach was to benchmark. We look at those metrics measured across a wide range of organizations. We, besides the basic benchmark that captures everyone, we then split it into the 3 tiers: the startups, scale-ups, and enterprise, to try and see if there's different behaviors across these segments. And this is how we define them based on number of employees. And then we used fixed bands for, elite, good, fair, and needs improvements. So the top 10% are going to be elite. And our benchmark report says
the same
exactly
approach
what the
DORA
values are.
uses.
I think DORA is actually using a clustering approach, right?
Yep, that's right. The clusters come and go. Like elite disappeared for a little while, and so it's weird.
Right.
Yishai,
So,
can we move forward a bit to focus on that code review piece, if you don't mind?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Awesome. I'm going to jump us ahead here. I know we have some key insights that highlight the code review, because I see a bunch of questions in chat around that. We can come back maybe to the resource allocation piece. Yishai, I'll pass it back to you.
Sure. So when looking at the code review, what makes it longer? What is holding us back from being efficient with our time and with our handoffs, with our communication between people? First of all, we split. This is happening in our product and in our research. We split the code review to pickup time, which is I submit a pull request. Now it's waiting for someone to start reviewing it. That's pickup. This is about communication in the team, about queue. Who's like, did I assign it to someone who's on vacation? A lot of, I would say, non-technical factors. And then there's the review process itself, which we define as the review began. There's an initial comment or artifact of the review all the way until my PR is merged. So everything that's needed to get agreement and get the code merged. And so that's pickup time and review time. And then we studied how these behave, comparing to, first of all, how pickup and review correlate with each other. And the top chart here is telling us that there's a very strong correlation between pickup time and review time. If the pull request has languished in wait for the review to begin, the review itself is also going to get longer. And this is, a myriad of factors at play here. Like if this is a monster PR, people are going to shy away from starting to review it. And then it's going to take longer also. But also, once things have waited, once things are no longer on the fast track, everything tends to get slower. If I'm getting I have a small PR, but I'm getting the review 3 days after I submitted the pull request, I'm already in a different place. It's another context switch for me to get back to answer the review or change my code or whatever. So everything is going to be slower. My takeaway here is do what you can to get your PRs picked up faster. This will also get you a quicker review time, all the way to merge. The second chart on the bottom, one page back, Conor. Thanks. That's about the handoffs. So we measured the number of handoffs between people, right? I submit a review, someone else is reviewing, that's a handoff. Now I respond, that's another handoff, and so on. And obviously, more handoffs create longer reviews, right? Every time the PR moves from one person to another, this is going to take time. It's really not their main task right now. So minimizing handoffs is key to getting fast reviews. And I like to suggest maybe 2 ways to do this. One, provide more context, be more expressive in the pull request. Like, can I give more information so that the reviewer doesn't have to ask questions? And when I'm giving a review, I can mark a piece of code and say no, right? I've seen code reviews like that. That's going to get a couple of handoffs just to understand what you mean. But if I provide more context and I'm more explicit and I'm providing a suggestion, that's going to be much faster. So context is king here. And this is on the far right side of the chart, there is a time when you want to say, get a room, do it sync, right? A pull request review is typically async. Too many handoffs or when that begins, that's a sign for you to say, go sync and solve the problem or get that review over the fence instead of continuing that async handoffs.
Yeah, those are great. Yeah, these also sound like a lot of the tactics versus strategy thing we were just talking about. Is like the strategy is like to see this correlation and be aware of it, and then the tactics depend on the context, right? Like what's going on? Like why do we need to? What's going on with these 2 folks who are having a long duration for some reason, right?
And then there's also I would say maybe the middle ground. If I'm seeing in a retrospect that we have a problem with pickup, we can do an experiment to looks at the review queue and try to, you've already context switched, right? You had lunch or after a big meeting, everyone is already context switched. Now start by reviewing. That's a very simple way to get pickup time reduced because you're going to, PRs are not going to wait for 2 days, right? Here we're looking at merge frequency and comparing that to the review cycle to both pickup time and review time. Merge frequency is a measurement of like how many PRs am I able to merge every week, right? As a developer, and Steve, you mentioned that before, developers love to delivered. They're happy when things are getting done. They're typically frustrated. Maybe this is contrary to common belief, but developers want to produce. And when things are stuck, they're frustrated. I worked so hard on this and it takes forever to get it, all the way through because of a myriad of blockers. So I'm looking at merge frequency as a developer experience metric. My developers are able to push, there's less obstacles and they're able to push their code, get more PRs merged every week. And when we're comparing that to both pickup time and review time, we see a pretty obvious negative correlation. The longer the pickup and review time, the slower I'm going to be able to merge my PRs. Now, this may seem very obvious, but there's one thing to learn here. I could, be thinking, hey, people are doing multiple things at once, right? When I'm waiting for my PR to get reviewed, I'm already working on the next thing. So I could be thinking that, okay, I'll have 10 PRs in the air. Just having a slower cycle doesn't mean less throughput, right? I could just be having a longer queue of things in the air, and whenever they're ready, I'm pushing them. And this data tells us that doesn't happen. That doesn't work. There's a cost in having too much WIP. And if your cycle is longer, your throughput is going to get lower as well. So look, like that's maybe one of the reasons why effective code review leads to that results that, the DORA research is telling us about the delivery, and eventually the developer happiness that is associated with it.
Yishai, I know we have a couple more insights we wanted to share here, but it looks like we're coming up on time. So if you want to maybe speed through these in the next 60 seconds, then we'll kind of close out.
Sure. So this one is where we segregated the org size. We looked at how cycle time, which is our measure for, how long it takes from initial coding all the way to code delivered, correlates closely with a key DORA metric around it. And what we see here is that enterprises have longer cycle time. There's pretty much across the data. Once you go enterprise, your cycles are longer. This could be about, needing to jump through more hoops, having more people involved in getting something approved and eventually delivered. And, startups and scale-ups have an advantage here where they're able to move faster in terms of cycle time. When you look at merge frequency and cycle time together and how these are behaving across those three segments, again, you see startups and scale-up pretty much in the same place, with scale-up having slightly slower merge frequency, and then enterprise with a much lower, like a typical developer in enterprise is only able to push, 0.7 PRs a week. So they have more obstacles to go through, and enterprises need to look at what are these obstacles and how do I remove them so my developers can move faster.
And talking about how to remove those, we're really asking, what do we do with these insights? So, one thing you can do, I think Jackson's going to drop a link to the chat to this, or you can go to linearb.io to get started. And that is get your team's DORA metrics for free. We have a free DORA dashboard we're rolling out. Steve talked earlier about wanting to tag in these qualitative insights from the DORA report with quantitative. Great. We want to give every team the opportunity to have their quantitative DORA metrics measured for them easily just by connecting your Git and PM tooling, make it really simple for you. And then diving into that code reviews piece. One of the really important things here is speeding up code reviews, right? We've highlighted that as kind of the easiest place for you to improve your systems. So LinearB platform, Gitstream or Gitstream.cm will get you here. And what we've done is we're helping teams standardize their code review process with programmable workflows from an easily configurable YAML file that you attach to your repos. These are both free tools. Frankly, we want to see the results of them so we can understand what to develop next. And our goal is to drive code review efficiency. Maybe you need 2 reviewers on an area of the code base that needs high quality or has compliance concerns. Great. We can help you automate that and reduce that context switching we're talking about. Or maybe it's a documentation change. And in fact, you just want to auto approve that, let it go through. We can also make that happen. And there's a lot of stuff you can do with these tools. Yishai, do you want to highlight anything on this? Otherwise, I can jump ahead or jump back to that insight or talk a bit about the impacts we're seeing here from some of the data around programmable workflows.
Yeah. I think I would say the main takeaway is start measuring your DORA metrics. Start looking at them, start finding those things that are holding back to improve. Um, Definitely code reviews. If you want to double click into that, there's the DORA community session that Steve mentioned today. I think it's in 1 hour, right?
Yep.
Steve, can you drop a link in chat if you have a chance?
Yep.
Awesome. And Yishai, I know we had one more insight. I know we're at time, so a lot of folks are going to have to drop off. But if you want to talk a bit about this, I think it's a really interesting correlation between the insights we saw in DORA's report around improved deployment time, given that we also saw this interesting code quality piece aligned with cross-team PRs.
Sure. So here we were looking at both rework rate, which is our measure of how much of the code that's getting committed is getting modified very quickly, right? Within less than 3 weeks after it's been committed. There's always going to be change in existing code, which is typically refactors and the code base grows. But when a lot of your code doesn't, live longer than 2 or 3 weeks, you have this could be a sign or a signal of a problem in that specific area in the code base. Some like very fast code churn in high amounts. So rework rate is a good proxy to looking at quality issues. So what we see on the left is, a slightly higher rework rate across enterprises. And when we look at the right hand, this is about understanding the cross-team behaviors of pull requests and code review. So we're measuring how many of your pull requests are being touched, which means coding, reviewing, comments, etc., by people are outside of the team. And we can see with startups, almost 20%, like 17 and something, almost 80% of the pull requests are getting collaboration across, like that falls outside of a single team boundary. With enterprise, this is much lower. In a typical small startup, everyone does everything. And as you grow and as you specialize and you have specialized teams, there's more ability to get things done within the same team. One could say this is great for the code review. It's possibly a tighter code review process. But at least what we see here is that this correlates with a higher rework rate. You get more things to fix. One possible explanation for this is that when you have more people in different like surrounding teams involved in the pull request, you're able to surface problems sooner. This code will not get committed and then fixed. It will be fixed and then committed. When you're working in a siloed version, when one team does its own thing, this may get reviewed, committed, merged, maybe even deployed. And then another team finds out that there's an integration issue, there's a gap, there's a need to change. So this could be a signal of, are you fixing the problems in the pull request, or are you fixing them after the code was merged? And then you will see higher rework. So having a silo, having one team look at the PRs may have that disadvantage, which is what we think we're seeing here.
Yeah, we got to break down those silos, right?
Yes,
so,
definitely.
Guys, I know we're at time, but we have over 100 people still here. If you guys have a couple more minutes, I know we have a few more Q&A questions. Are you guys cool to stay on for 5 or 10 and answer a couple more questions?
I'm here.
Yep.
Great. So a couple things that jumped up at here, and I'll take a peek at these in chat. Anonymous attendee asks, what are some healthy gates before merging to main? We have a debate internally ranging from unit integration automation tests required before merge to hide it behind a feature flag until the feature in the UI stabilizes and add test/observability before the release. What does a healthy balance look like? I don't know if either of you have thoughts you want to share on.
I think that highly depends on where you are as a company, like how fast you want to move and how quickly you can react to problems. I know, like at Google, like there's a lot of unit tests. There's also a very advanced unit test management system, and so like we can afford to just say like all tests must pass before you commit the end, right? Like if you can pull that off and it can be fast enough without people being like, oh, the build system's too slow, then great. But it's a trade-off. So
yeah, maybe I would add here. Totally agree. This is very dependent on your. Like, can I trust my test suite, might harness my processes to find the critical problems before I deploy it. I would also add, this doesn't have to be a binary decision, even for a single repo, right? Today, you can define gates in the, for what is required to get things merged. We offer like a more nuanced approach here. Some pull requests may be fine to merge without all the test suite running. Others may not. Gitstream, that tool that we highlighted a couple of minutes ago, is our approach to implementing that and letting you decide, basically program your policy here to say, this needs to happen for these PRs, this needs to happen for those PRs. And this is context, like it looks at the actual PR and decides based on your rules, what needs to happen, what is the gates that I need to go through. This doesn't have to be a single answer for the entire pipeline.
Yeah, to Yishai's point, like maybe part of your code has deep compliance needs because it deals with consumer data, and you need to have an expert review or extra compliance review. You can adjust that pipeline. I would really encourage teams to look at how does your pipeline need to be different depending on the needs of the team, like Steve said, and what you're working on. We had a question in chat earlier that didn't make it into the Q&A. It's from Mansoor, and he asked, is it a good idea to share these DORA metrics with the executive team, especially as CEO? And if not, what should we communicate or what context should we add? And I know, Yishai, you have some viewpoints on that, and I'd love to hear Steve's thoughts.
Yeah, go ahead, Steve. Now I want to hear Yishai first because he's got opinions, man. This is great.
Yeah. So first of all, we're seeing, and if I'm looking across the past 2-3 years, we're seeing CEOs start asking about DORA metrics or metrics, engineering metrics. They're starting to care. The whole market is getting educated about the need to measure and look at data. No longer can the VP of sales come with deep data that everyone understands in the boardrooms, and VP of marketing as well, but VP engineering says, this is going to maybe deliver in Q2. So that is changing, and CEOs are now looking for interesting metrics. DORA or parts of it are very useful because they're very common, and there's the way to ground them in benchmark. But you need to choose as a leader of the engineering org. This is what I'm showing. I'm showing the trend, right? No one cares if I'm a 3 or a 3.5. Everyone cares if we're moving forward. And our advice, and we have some templates for this, like slides, how to present that, combine the health metrics or like the performance metrics for your org with developer experience and with information about, are we delivering the right things? Are we delivering things that matter for the organization? If you're just focusing on just our DevOps is quick, that's going to miss the mark and maybe even hyper focus on the wrong thing. So you need to balance it. I would say yes, give metrics, show them.
Steve, I'd love to get your thoughts on this. And I'll also just note that I shared a link to the deck Yishai uses to show metrics to our C-suite. It's his CTO board deck. It is in the chat. If you want to use it, please steal it, use the template. Happy to get that to y'all. Steve, what do you think?
Yeah, so the numbers that I think are helpful to share are at the org level, not at certainly not the individual, probably not even the team level, but like kind of the sense of how we're doing, like the we're getting better over time kind of thing. That's okay, right? I think that shows, like, as the CTO, you may show like, hey, our engineering team is getting better under these efforts that we're doing. You don't want the CEO to, especially if they're a technical person, to try to like step in and micromanage. Like, that's not the goal of the CTO. It's like reporting here. So you don't want to like give that person any bait, right? But what you can do is you can show how your company is doing compared to other companies in the same sector. That's a good number to say, like, we are, either leading or we're like a laggard of how we deploy software for our sector. Therefore, like, we should like double down, or we need to like seriously invest in improving this. And it's not just because it's a good idea, but we can show that, these teams that are in our sector that have like this high software developer or deployment rate, or performance, have like the business level outcomes, which is what the CEO actually cares about. Like, they make more money, like they have more customers, they, higher revenue, stock price, all this stuff. Like, you can show that like this is part of like the DORA like high level executive pitch is that, the ability to deliver software actually results in organizational outcomes. And so what you really want at the end of the day is like your executive to understand that like you guys are on the right track, or that they need to provide more investment. Like, we're not on the right track. We need to be better at software development. Here's why, right? And that way the software engineering, the CEO can be like, oh, this is more important than I thought. Funding, right? Or like, oh, well, I guess we're in trouble, or, whatever it is. Like, you want to make sure that it's something that the executive can make a decision on.
And then a couple of things coming up here again on code reviews. I see Daniel Chong asked, what metrics can be looked at to measure quality of pull request reviews? Since you just talked about the Yishai, how do we know if a review was just an LGTM or if there was a critical review done? Well, things like tracking defects back to a specific PR could be a way to do so. There are complexities that create this link and make it hard to do efficiently.
Sorry, Conor, I didn't hear the full question.
Sorry about that. So the question was, around measuring quality of pull request reviews. How can you tell if something's just an LGTM or if there's a critical review done, and advice around that?
Yeah, this is not easy, but with the new Gen AI capabilities starting to get much closer to being more of a solved problem, because you can analyze the actual review and determine whether this carries information. Did the review cause a code change? Right? Was there a response that actually changed something in the wake of that review? If I'm giving huge reviews, but no one's changing their code, this is like whistling in the wind. So I think a combination of looking at the impact of, was there a code change following that review, or a material code change, and then also I'm also already seeing tools around Gen AI to analyze a review and not just help summarize it, but also understand whether this is meaningful or just, oh, this looks okay.
I'd recommend two things also. These are kind of tactical. Well, one of them is, at least. Often we'll find that folks who do like these lightweight reviews that are not terribly meaningful, they're kind of, it can just be a kind of a laziness factor, but it can also be like the code change that I'm seeing has too many of these, like, we can call them like surface level problems, right? And so they'll go in and they'll do a lot of like code style recommendations, which have no meaningful impact on the actual runtime of the code. But if they do a lot of that, it'll look like a big review, and they'll be like, oh, I think I'm done. Like, look at all the stuff I did, right? If you can prevent that by having like an automated linter step in front of the code review step. So like, don't make humans lint. Like step one, like let the linters lint, right? And so that way, when it comes to the reviewer, they're not going to do any linting, and they're going to be like, oh, now I should really actually think about this. Like, there's not all this like easy, like, low hanging fruit for me to pick on. I have to actually think through this. The other one though, which is a little bit harder to do, but is probably more impactful, is you mentioned having, tying incidents back to PRs. That's hard. Totally. Like, if you can do it, sure. Okay. Like, we can find like what did happen, which caused the thing. But really what you want to do at a higher level, there's a movement, it even has a name and everything, called learning from incidents, right? And the idea here is to perform retrospectives of especially your biggest incidents, but hopefully as many of them as you can, including like close calls, which is really kind of where the gold is. If you can do that, and it's important to note that it's not learning about incidents. Like, I don't actually care what happened in the last outage. Like, all the details like kind of don't matter. What I really want to know is, what did we learn about the system that broke? What did we not know before? And now that we've learned about it, now that we've gone through this outage and we've learned a bunch of things, like, oh, I didn't know that the blue knob was connected to the yellow spinner. Like, that, clearly, now that we know that, I'm never going to make that problem again. What are those things that we learned about the system? Make sure those get published. Make sure those get well distributed within the company, because that's the gold, right? If you know the thing about the spinner and everything, like, no one's going to make that connection in like the next version of that code bug again, right? And no, code review analytics system is going to solve that for you. you just have to be able to learn from your system, right? This kind of comes back to culture again. Like, do you have a culture of people who look back at the failures and don't go, you don't want them to go like, oh man, that was a bummer. I never want to talk about that again, right? But instead they want to look at it and be like, what can we learn from this incident? Like, not who did it, not what was the exact cause, but like, what was the misunderstanding that we all had in our heads about this thing, right? Were we just not treating it safely? Did we think that the yellow thing was independent, where in fact it was actually held up by a bunch of duct tape, right? What were those underlying misunderstandings? So if you can get that and get a practice of that repeatedly over and over and over again, then you'll have a really good outcome. And can you measure it? I don't know, but like, I'm sure it'll be better. So you can start with that.
Related to this, Steven actually asked, instead of timekeeping, what about focusing on code churn metrics to spot these inefficiencies? I know obviously that's not like hard to correlate, we talked about, but what do you think about that idea to help spot inefficiencies in the full software delivery lifecycle?
So code churn, as in how much of my code actually eventually lives on in the repo?
Yeah, I'm wondering if we could correlate, review size back to that, or some of these context switching challenges. Just an idea.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. We haven't correlated these in our data. Interesting to try and follow up on that. I think the inefficiencies in the review process, like large batch size and long waits, they're first and foremost going to hurt your productivity, your team's productivity, and you're going to get more frustration. I think as a second level impact, this may be a way to hide quality issues, right? A huge PR, there's going to be something lurking in there, and it's just too large to find in this huge, massive code change. But I think that's going to be secondary, if I had to guess. And not being efficient in the code review process should not mean your code is getting bad.
Steve, Yishai, thank you so much for staying on here. We got 2 more questions if you guys are okay with it. I really appreciate you both coming on, and thank you for the more than 80 folks who are still with us here, nearly 90 minutes in. One simple one, Yishai, I don't know if you'll answer this, but do we know when Gitstream will support Azure DevOps? And Gitstream, for those folks who aren't following closely in chat, is that programmable workflows free tooling that we are giving out.
Yeah, I don't want to throw our product team under the bus here, so I don't have a date.
2024.
And definitely,
Tomorrow.
seeing the, yeah. Oh, we're not selling it yet. The traction and the responses we're getting on Gitstream in the other code platforms like GitHub and GitLab definitely encourage us to, add the others, add support for more platforms. And we're seeing more and more interesting market and usage in the Azure stack and Azure DevOps across everything that LinearB is doing. And so the Gitstream is definitely interesting there. So the answer is yes. I don't know, but I don't know when.
Great. And then this last question from Robert is self-reports are good, but can succumb to anonymity fears or internal bias. So you know about any initiatives to also use passively generated data for a more holistic view of sentiment, such as Slack message flow counts, message sentiments about company initiatives, complexity of task tickets compared to their action velocity?
I get it. Like, talking to people's hard. I'm sorry, you have to do it. Like, you're not going to get the value you think from like these other methods. You can do them both. You can also talk to people, and then you can try to like see some correlations between the data that was listed here and those basically interviews. But you have to do the interviewing. You can't just like hope that there's a magic metric out there that you just haven't found yet, because there isn't, because people are complex, and you have to talk with them. Sorry.
Fair enough. Steve, Yishai, thank you both so much. Do you either have any closing thoughts you want to share as we wrap up here?
I'm good.
Awesome. No. The classic S3 sign off is may the queries flow and the pagers stay silent.
I like it.
Amen to that.
And thank you everyone who stuck around and reach out to us at the DevOps Substack, or, I think we're all pretty responsive on LinkedIn or over email. Happy to answer follow-up questions that come up. And thank you all for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks all.